Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
Beginning Monday during the day, and then throughout the night, Hamas and Islamic Jihad fired barrages of rockets into Israel. On Tuesday, they hit two buildings in the Israeli coastal town of Ashkelon, wounding some 30 Israelis, and later hit this home in Ashdod. On Monday afternoon, sirens wailed in the city of Jerusalem for the first time since 2014. These Israelis had gathered on Jerusalem Day to march into the city, celebrating the reunification of Jerusalem in 1967. Police also evacuated the Western Wall during the sirens. Several rockets did hit communities on the outskirts of Jerusalem, damaging homes. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned Hamas and other Islamic groups.
This evening on Jerusalem Day, the terrorist organizations in Gaza have crossed the red line and attacked us with missiles in the outskirts of Jerusalem. Israel will respond with great force. We will not tolerate attacks on our territory or our capital, on our citizens or our soldiers.
Netanyahu also warned Israelis the current conflict could go on for some time. The Israel Defense Force responded with airstrikes at Hamas targets inside the Gaza Strip to stop the rocket fire. Hamas said 24 were killed, including a number of children. The IDF says some of those who died were caused by stray rockets fired by Hamas. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah Party called for more demonstrations in Jerusalem with this video. This is Jerusalem calling to its residents. And Jerusalem, we will redeem it with our lives. We will sacrifice for the sake of the Al-Aqsa Mosque until the last breath. We will turn the world upside down for the sake of this homeland. Former UN Ambassador for Israel Danny Danon told CBN News Abbas has been behind the riots of the past few weeks.
We have to understand that it is not a spontaneous riot. It is orchestrated by President Abbas from the beginning. He decided to cancel the elections in the Palestinian Authority, and he knew that there would be a lot of criticism about that. And immediately, he put the focus on Jerusalem. They are using the holy site of Jerusalem in order to incite riots and violence.
The riots for the last 2 weeks and the rockets of the last several days come during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, when there are increased calls for martyrdom, jihad, and holy war. Hopes were high that the situation would calm down with the end of Ramadan on Wednesday. Now it looks like Israel could be preparing for war.
Joining us now is our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief, Chris Mitchell. Chris, thanks for being here. We're praying, of course, for your safety during this time. Speaking of safety, I know Israel is heavily dependent on tourism. They want to reopen the country, but how safe is Israel right now, not just for tourism, but for people like yourself and Israelis?
Well, it kind of depends where you are, John. If you were here yesterday in Jerusalem, we could hear some of the booms of the rockets that either hit or perhaps the Iron Dome that had intercepted them. So just around Jerusalem, there were several places that were hit, about 5 miles from where we are. Right now in Ashkelon, which is just a few miles north of the Gaza border, there have been hundreds of rockets that hit there. It's a very unsafe place to be right now. Many of the people there are told to stay in their shelters. And 2 people have died. There's been a couple of dozen Israelis wounded. In Gaza, there's maybe about 24 people that have died tragically. And to explain some of the deaths in the Gaza Strip, John, and people may wonder why the death toll is like that, is that Hamas, Islamic Jihad, they fire their missiles from civilian areas. And so when Israel tries to strike those surgical strikes, unfortunately, some people have died in the process. But many of those are part of these Hamas, Islamic Jihad terrorists as well.
Chris, speaking of the situation there, what is the Israeli government doing to protect Israel?
Well, right now, they just had a security cabinet meeting. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says that they're going to intensify these attacks against Hamas and these rockets. Defense Secretary Benny Gantz said they're going to set back these terror groups a number of years. I heard on the WhatsApp that we're getting almost on a minute-by-minute basis, about 80 planes that have just left, and they're going to have a intensive campaign against these terror groups inside Gaza for the next several hours. So that's what's happening right now. And to your point about praying for safety, you need to pray for safety for all the people here and wisdom for the leaders on know what they need to do.
Chris, remind us, we know it seems like there's been relative peace, and I know that relative is subjective, but what led up to the flare-up this time?
Well, this time, many people believe, and the people that I've been talking to that monitor the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian politics, is that several weeks ago there was a scheduled election here in the Palestinian Authority. Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian Authority president, is in the 15th year of a 4-year term. So a lot of people were looking forward to those elections. He canceled them, and a lot of people believe that he used the pretext of a land dispute in a neighborhood in Jerusalem called Sheikh Jarrah as a rallying point for many Palestinians and his Jerusalem Arabs. That really did take off. That's what sparked many of the riots. And many people believe that was all a distraction to try to get away from the fact that he did cancel election. He took a lot of heat from the European Union, from other people, and particularly in the Palestinian population. So many people believe that's what got this all started, was an attempt by Mahmoud Abbas to distract from canceling those elections several weeks ago.
Chris, we only have about a minute or so left. Speaking of elections, how might all of this play out in Israeli elections? I know that they're still trying to figure out who is going to lead the country. How do you think that this might affect those ongoing negotiations?
Great question, John. Right now, Yair Lapid, he's the head of the Yesh Atid party. He's in a 28-day period right now to try to form a government. What he needed to form that government was an Islamist Arab party called Ra'am. Up till yesterday, they were going to have final negotiations to put everything together. When the rockets started firing against Israel, Israel retaliated. Ra'am, this Islamist Arab party, said no negotiations until the violence stops. So right now it's on hold. It's a possibility, John, that that Yair Lapid will not be able to form a government, and that could lead to the 5th election in Israel here in just over 2 years.
Well, in the meantime, we will do as you often say, which is pray for the peace of Israel. CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, thank you so much for your time, and be safe.
Thanks, Sean.